Hello, guys and gals, and this is part 11 of our reading through The Last Unicorn by Peter Beagle. In the last episode, Smendrick turned the unicorn into a human, female, and they approached Hagrid's castle. Now, one of the sentries could tell that Amalthea, the name of the unicorn now, the Lady Amalthea, was new, or something was different about her. And they are trying to get inside the castle. And so, yeah, we're going to see if they can get inside the castle and convince the guards to let them in. Okay. Okay. What kind of royal matter could a wandering wizard with a foolish tongue have to discuss with King Hagrid? The second sentinel asked somberly, but he turned and strode through the castle gate, and the king's visitors straggled after through the castle gate. No, wait. After him. After him, rather. Last wandered the young sentinel, his step grown as tender as that of Lady Amalthea, whose every moment he imitated unaware. She stayed a moment before the gate, looking out to sea, and the sentinel did the same. His former comrade called angrily to him, but the young sentry was on a different duty, answerable to a new captain for his derelictions. He entered at the gate only after the Lady Amalthea had chosen to go in. Then he followed, singing to himself in a dreamy drone, "What is it that is happening to me? What is it that is happening to me? I cannot tell whether to be glad or be afraid. What is it that is happening to me?" They crossed a cobbled courtyard, where cold laundry groped their faces, and passed through a smaller door into a hall so vast that they could not see the walls or the ceiling in the darkness. Great stone pillars rushed up to them as they trudged across the hall, and then leaned away without ever really letting themselves be seen. Breath echoed in that huge place, and the footsteps of other smaller creatures sounded just as clearly as their own. Molly Grew stayed quite close to Smendrick. After the great hall, there came another door, and then a thin stair. There were few windows and no lights. The stair coiled tighter and tighter as it ascended until it seemed that every step turned around on itself, and that the tower was closing on them, closing on them all like a sweaty fist. The darkness looked at them and touched them. It had a rainy doggy smell. Something mumbled somewhere deep and near. The tower trembled like a ship run aground, and answered with a low stone wail. The three travelers cried out, scrambling to keep their feet on the shuddering stairs, but the guide pressed on without faltering or speaking. The younger man whispered earnestly to Lady Amalthea, "It's all right. Don't be afraid. It's just a bowl." The sound was not repeated. The second sentinel halted abruptly, producing a key from a secret place and jabbing it apparently straight into the blank wall. A section of the wall swung inward, and the small procession filed into a low, narrow chamber with one window and a chair at the far end. There was nothing else. No other furnishings, no rug, no draperies, no tapestries in the room. In the room were 5 people. The tall chair and the mealy light of the rising new moon. "This is King Hagrid's throne room," said the sentinel. The magician gripped him by the mailed elbow and turned him until they faced each other. "This is a cell. This is a tomb. No living king sits here. Take us to Haggard if he is alive." "You must judge that for yourself," replied the scurrying voice of the sentinel. He unlaced his helmet and lifted it from his gray head. "I am King Haggard," he said. His eyes were the same color as the horns of the Red Bull. He was taller than Spindrick, and though his face was bitterly lined, there was nothing fond or foolish in it. It was a pike's face, the jaw low and cold, the cheeks hard, and the lean neck alive with power. He might have been 70 years old, or 80 or more. The first sentinel came forward now, with his own helmet under his arm. Molly gaped when she saw his face, for it was the friendly, rumpled face of the young prince, who had read a magazine while his princess tried to call a unicorn. King Haggard said, "This is Lear." "Hi," said Prince Lear. "Glad to meet you." His smile wriggled at their feet. Like a hopeful puppy, but his eyes, a deep shadowy blue behind stubby lashes, rested quietly on the eyes of the Lady Amalthea. She looked back at him, silent as a jewel, seeing him no more truly than men see unicorns. But the prince felt strangely happily certain that she had looked him round and through, and down into the cavern that he had never known was there, where her glance echoed and sang. Prodigies began to waken somewhere southwest of the 12th rib, and he himself, still missing the Lady Amalthea, began to shine. "What is your concern with me?" Spindrick the magician cleared his throat and bowed to the pale-eyed old man. "We seek to enter your services, for far and wide has the fabled court of King Haggard." "I need no servants." The king turned away, his face and body suddenly slack and indifferent. Yet Spindrick sensed a curiosity lingering in the stone-cold skin and at the roots of the gray hair. He said cautiously, "But surely you keep some following. Simplicity is the richest adornment of a king, I grant you, but for such a king as Haggard—" "You are losing my interest," the rustling voice interrupted him again, "and that is very dangerous. In a moment I will have forgotten you quite entirely, and will never be able to remember just what I did with you. What I forget not only ceases to exist, but never really existed in the first place." As he said this, his eyes, like those of his son, turned to meet the Lady Amalthea's eyes. "My court," he continued, "since you choose to call it that, consists of 4 men-at-arms. I would do without them if I could, for they cost more than they are worth, like everything else. But they take their turns as sentries and as cooks, and they give the appearance of an army from a distance. What other attendants should I need? But the pleasures of court," the magician cried, "the music, the talk, the women, and the fountains, the hunts, and the masks, and the great feasts. They are nothing to me," King Haggard said. "I have known them all, and they have not made me happy. I will keep nothing near me that does not make me happy." Lady Amalthea moved quietly past him to the window and looked out at the night sea. Spindrick came around to catch the wind again and declared, "I understand you perfectly. How weary, stale, flat, and unprofitable seem to you all the uses of this world. You are bored with bliss, satiated with sensation, jaded with jejune joys. It is a king's affliction, and therefore no one wants the services of a magician more than a king does, for only to a magician is the world forever fluid, infinite, mutable, and eternally new. Only he knows the secret of change. Only he knows truly that all things are crouched in eagerness to become something else, and it is from this universal tension that he draws his power. To a magician, March is May, snow is green, and grass is gray. This is that, or whatever you say. Get a magician today. He finished on one knee with both arms flung wide. King Haggard stepped nervously away from him, muttering, "Get up, get up. You make my head hurt. Besides, I already have a royal magician." Smendrick rose heavily to his feet, his face red and empty. "You never said. What is his name?" "He is called Maybrook," Haggard replied. "I do not often speak to him. Even my men-at-arms do not know that he lives here in my castle. Maybrook is all that you have said a wizard should be, and much more, and I doubt your dream of. Okay. He is known in his trade as the magician's magician. I can see no reason to replace him with some vagrant, nameless, clownish. Ah, but I can," Smendrick said, broke in desperately. "I can think of one reason, uttered by you yourself not a minute since. This marvelous Maybrook does not make you happy." Over the king's fierce face there fell a slow shadow of disappointment and betrayal. For a breath he looked like a bewildered young man. "Why, no, that is true," King Haggard murmured. "Maybrook's magic has not delighted me for a long time." "How long has it been, I wonder?" He clapped his hand briskly, crying out, "Maybrook, Maybrook, appear, Maybrook." "I am here," said a deep voice from a far corner of the room. An old man in a dark spangled gown and a pointed spangled hat was standing there, and no one could say surely that he had not been standing there in plain sight since they entered the throne room. His beard and brows were white, and the cast of his face was mild and wise, but his eyes were as hard as hailstones. "What does your majesty wish of me?" "Maybrook," King Haggard said. "This gentleman is of your fraternity. His name is Smendrick." The old wizard's icy eyes widened slightly as he peered at the shabby man. "Why, so it is," he exclaimed in seeming pleasure. "Smendrick, my dear boy, how nice to see you. You won't remember me, but I was a dear friend of your tutor, dear old Nikos. He had such high hopes for you, the poor man. Well, this is a surprise, and you are really still in the profession? My, you're a determined fellow. I always say perseverance is 9/10 of any art. Not that it's much help to be 9/10 an artist, of course, but what can it be that brings you here?" "He has come to take your place." King Haggard's voice was flat and final. "He is now my royal magician." Smendrick's start of amazement was not lost on old Maybrook, though the wizard himself seemed a little surprised by the king's decision. For a moment he obviously considered the worth of wrath, but instead he chose a tone of genial amusement. "As your majesty wills it, now and always," he purred, "but perhaps your majesty might be interested in learning a bit of the history of his new magician. I'm sure dear Smendrick won't mind my mentioning that he is already something of a legend in the trade. Indeed, among adepts he is best remembered as Nikos Folly. His charming and complete inability to master the simplest rune, his creative way with the most childish rhyme of theurgy, let alone." King Haggard made a thin motion with the edge of one hand, and Maybrook was suddenly silent. Prince Lear giggled, and the king said, "I do not need to be persuaded of his unfitness for the position. A single glance at him tells me that, as a glance makes it plain that you are one of the great wizards of the world." Maybrook swelled gently, fondling his glorious beard and wrinkling his benign brow. "But that also is nothing to me," King Haggard went on. "In the past you have performed whatever miracle I required of you, and all it has done has been to spoil my taste for miracles. No task is too vast for your power, and yet when the wonder is achieved, nothing has changed. It must be that great power cannot give me whatever it is that I really want. A master magician has not made me happy. I will see what an incompetent one can do. You may go, Maybrook, he nodded his head to dismiss the old wizard. Maybrook's semblance of affability vanished like a spark on snow, and with the same sound, his whole face became like his eyes. I am not packed off as easily as that, he said very softly. Not on a whim, even a king's whim, and not in favor of a fool. Beware, Haggard. Maybrook is no one to anger lightly. A wind began to rise in the dark chamber. It came as much from one place as another, through the window, through the half-open door, but its true source was the clenched figure of the wizard. The wind was cold and rank, a wet, hooty marsh wind, and it leaped here and there in the room, like a gleeful animal discovering the flimsiness of human beings. Molly shrank against Smendrick, who looked uncomfortable. Prince Lear fidgeted his sword in and out of its sheath. Even King Haggard gave back a step before the triumphant grin of old Maybrook. The walls of the room seemed to thaw and run away. And the wizard's starry gown became the huge howling night. Maybrook spoke no word himself, but the wind was beginning to make a wicked, grunting sound as it gained strength. In another moment it would become visible, burst into shape. Smendrick opened his mouth, but if he were shouting a counterspell, it could not be heard, and it did not work. In the darkness, Molly saw the Lady Amalthea turning far away, stretching out a hand on which the ring and middle finger were of equal length. The strange place on her forehead was glowing, as bright as a flower. Then the wind was gone, as though it had never been, and the stone walls were around them once more, the dull chamber as gay as noon after Maybrook's night. The wizard was crouched almost to the floor, staring at the Lady Amalthea. His wise, benevolent face looked like the face of a drowned man, and his beard dripped thinly from his chin like stagnant water. Prince Lear took him by the arm. "Come on, old man," he said, not unkindly. This way out. Grandad, I'll write you a reference." "I'm not going," Maybrook said. "Not from fear of you, you lump of stale dough, nor of your mad, ungrateful father, nor of your new magician. Much happiness may you have of him." His eyes met King Haggard's hungry eyes, and he laughed like a goat. "Haggard, I would not be you for all the world," he declared. You have let your doom in the front door, though it will not depart that way. I would explain myself more fully, but I am no longer in your service. This is a pity, for there will come a time when none but a master will be able to save you, and in that hour you will have Smendrick to call upon. Farewell, poor Haggard, farewell." Still laughing, he disappeared, but his mirth dwelled forever in the corners of the chamber, like the smell of smoke or of old cold dust. "Well," said King Haggard, in the grey moonlight. "Well." He came slowly towards Smendrick and Molly, his feet silent, his head weaving almost playfully. "Stand still," he commanded, when they moved. "I want to see your faces." His breath rasped like a knife on a grindstone as he peered from one of them to the other. "Closer," he grumbled, squinting through the dark. "Come closer, closer. I want to see you." "Light a light, then," said Molly Grew. The calmness of her own voice frightened her more than the fury of the old wizard had. It is easy to be brave for her sake, she thought, but if I begin being brave on my own account, where will it end? I never light lights, the king replied. What is the good of light? He turned from them, muttering to himself. One face is almost guileless, almost foolish, but not quite foolish enough. The other is a face like mine, and that must mean danger. Yet I saw all that at the gate. Why did I let them enter then? Maybrick was right. I have grown old and daft and easy. Still, I see only haggard when I look in their eyes. Prince Lear stirred nervously as the king paced across the throne room towards the Lady Amalthea. She was again gazing out the window, and King Haggard had drawn very near before she wheeled swiftly, lowering her head in a curious manner. I will not touch you, he said, as he stood still. Why do you linger at the window? He demanded. What are you looking at? I am looking at the sea, said the Lady Amalthea. Her voice was low and tremorous, not with fear, but with life, as a new butterfly shivers in the sun. Ah, said the king, yes, the sea is always good. There is nothing that I can look at for very long except the sea. Yet he stared at the Lady Amalthea's face for a long time, his own face giving back none of her light, as Prince Lear's had, but taking it in and keeping it somewhere. His breath was as musty as the wizard's wind, but the Lady Amalthea never moved. Suddenly he shouted, What is the matter with your eyes? They are full of green leaves, crowded with trees and streams and small animals. Where am I? Why can I not see myself in your eyes? The Lady Amalthea did not answer him. King Haggard swung around to face Smindrick and Molly. His scimitar smile laid its cold edge along their throats. Who is she? He demanded. Smindrick coughed several times. The Lady Amalthea is my niece, he offered. I am her only living relative, and so her guardian. No doubt the state of her attire puzzles you, but it is easily explained. On our journey, we were attacked by bandits and robbed of all our... What nonsense are you jabbering? What about her attire? The king turned again and regarded the white girl, and Smindrick suddenly understood that neither King Haggard nor his son had noticed that she was naked under the rags of her cloak. The Lady Amalthea held herself so gracefully that she made shreds and tatters seem like the only fitting dress for a princess, and besides, she did not know that she was naked. It was the armored king who seemed bare before her. King Haggard said, What she wears, what may have befallen you, what you all are to one another. These things are fortunately no concern of mine. In such matters you may lie to me as much as you dare. I want to know who she is. I want to know how she broke Maybrick's magic without saying a word. I want to know why there are green leaves and fox cubs in her eyes. Speak quickly and avoid the temptation to lie, especially about the green leaves. Answer me. Smindrick did not reply quickly. He made a few small sounds of an earnest nature, but not a sensible word was among them. Molly gathered her courage and answered, even though she suspected that it was impossible to speak the truth to King Haggard. Something in his winter presence blighted all words, tangled meanings, and bent honest intentions into shapes that tormented as the towers of his castle. Still, she would have spoken, but another voice was heard in the gloomy chamber, the light, kind, silly voice of the young Prince Lear. Father, what difference does it make? She is here now. King Haggard sighed. It was not a gentle sound, but low and scraping, not a sound of surrender, but the rumbling meditation of a tiger taught to spring. Of course, you are right, he said. She is here, they are all here, and whether they mean my doom or not, I will look at them for a while. A pleasant air of disaster attends them. Perhaps that is what I want. To Smindrick he said curtly, As my magician, you will entertain me while I wish to be entertained in manners variously profound and frivolous. You will be expected to know when you are required, and in what guise, for I cannot be forever identifying my moods and desires for your benefit. You will receive no wages, since that is certainly not what you came here for. As for your drab, your assistant, whatever you choose to call her, she will serve me also, if she wishes to remain in my castle. From this evening she is cook and maidservant, together scrub-woman and scullery maid as well. He paused, seemingly waiting for Molly to protest, but she only nodded. The room had moved away from the windows. The moon had moved away from the windows, but Prince Lear could see that the dark room was no darker for that. The cool brightness of the Lady Amalthea grew more slowly than had Maybrook's wind, but the prince understood quite well that it was far more dangerous. He wanted to write poems by that light, and he had never wanted to write poems before. You may come and go as you please, said King Haggard to the Lady Amalthea. It may have been foolish of me to admit you, but I am not so foolish as to forbid you this door or that. My secrets guard themselves. Will yours do the same? What are you looking at? I am looking at the sea, the Lady Amalthea replied again. Yes, the sea is always good, said the king. We will look at it together one day. He walked slowly to the door. It will be curious, he said, to have a creature in the castle whose presence caused Lear to call me father for the first time since he was 5 years old. 6, said Prince Lear. I was 6. 5 or 6, the king said. It had stopped making me happy long before, and it does not make me happy now. Nothing has changed because she is here. He was almost as silent as Maybrook, and then heard his tin boots ticking on the stairs. Molly Grew went softly to the Lady Amalthea and stood by her at the window. What is it? She asked. What do you see? Smendrick leaned on the throne, regarding Prince Lear with his long green eyes. Away in the valley of Hagsgate, the cold roar sounded again. I will find quarters for you, said Prince Lear. Are you hungry? I will get you something to eat. I know where there are some clothes, fine satin. You could make a dress. No one answered him. The heavy night swallowed his words, and it seemed to him that the Lady Amalthea neither heard nor saw him. She did not move, and yet he was certain that she was going away from him as he stood there, like the moon. Let me help you, Prince Lear said. What can I do for you? Let me help you. We are to chapter 10, and this is a good stopping point. This has been chapter 11. This has been episode 11, and we made it to chapter 10. This is all very good. We have been reading from The Last Unicorn, and I do want to check, see what page we made it to. 105. Good. Okay. Anyways, we've been reading The Last Unicorn by Peter Beagle. And if you like this content, make sure you like and subscribe and ring the bell so you know when I upload. And if you want to support me in any way at all the information will be in the description below. As always, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.